Maybe some of you are frustrated yourselves with just, it seems like every day we've had a Debbie Downer verse, right? But again, stay with me. We're going to keep going. We're trying to keep things in perspective. We're trying to realize that a lot of what we do, a lot of what occupies our minds, a lot of what we put our heart into, just honest assessment, is a meaningless chasing after the wind. It's vanity. It's to glorify ourselves and not to glorify God. That's what Solomon is realizing as he's given us this wisdom literature in Ecclesiastes, and he's trying to redirect us towards heaven and eternity, to fix our eyes on heaven, to keep our eyes focused on Jesus and the eternity that lies before us, to keep all things in the proper view. So that we can live for God's kingdom and His glory. Now we're going to jump into chapter 4. I've got a lot to cover today, so I'm going to get right into it. Let's take a look first of all at Ecclesiastes chapter 4, verse 1 through 3. Again, I saw all the oppressions that are done under the sun, and behold, the tears of the oppressed, and they had no one to comfort them. On the side of their oppressors there was power, and there was no one to comfort them. And I thought the dead who were already dead more fortunate than the living who are still alive. But better than both is he who has not yet been and has not yet seen the evil deeds that are done under the sun. Again, thanks God for that. I feel so much better about myself. Stay with me. The preacher writes that he has seen all this oppression under the sun, and we've all seen oppression. If you've ever gone to the Voice of the Martyr website or read some of their materials, you see the Christian oppression that exists in that 1040 window, in which a lot of the Muslim peoples live, and oppressing Christians. Even in some Hindu cultures and other Buddhist or animate cultures, the Christians are oppressed. There's oppression of all kinds. Throughout history, there's been oppression, and oppression causes loneliness because it makes you feel distant from everyone and everything, as if there's no one there to comfort. And oppression of all kinds begins us down a path of thinking no one can feel what I feel, no one knows what it's like to be me, and it leads us to that wrongful thinking that no one ever has experienced what I'm going through. And it just gives us this view that wickedness just prospers, that the oppressors, they're the ones that are comforted, and we just keep feeling the pain. So Solomon kind of concludes with this, that there is nothing good for us to be involved in, and that it'd just be better for us never to have lived at all. That's his conclusion in this immediate text. But we know there is. We know there is comfort for the oppressed. Jesus is our comforter. And if you read through Matthew 5, you know that Jesus comforts the oppressed. He's the deliverer of the downcast. The good news is Jesus put on skin, and He came to earth, and He wipes away our tears, and He takes away our mourning. I love the story of the little girl who had been sent to bed, and a storm blew in with lightning and thunder, and she calls out to her mother, "Mommy, I'm scared to be alone in our bedroom." And her mother replies, "It's okay, honey. Jesus is with you in your bedroom." And the girl responded, "But I want somebody with skin on." Well, Jesus became flesh. He took on skin, and He's our comforter in our times of oppression. Well, let's continue on here in what Solomon says. "Then I saw that all toil and all skill and work come from a man's envy of his neighbor. This also is vanity." Boy, that hits home, doesn't it? All the toil and all the skill and the work come from man's envy of his neighbor. It's a striving after the wind. Verse 5, "The fool folds his hands and eats his own flesh. Better is a handful of quietness than 2 hands full of toil and striving after the wind." Again, he says, "I saw vanity under the sun. One person who has no other, either son or brother, yet there is no end to all his toil, and his eyes are never satisfied with riches, so that he never asks, 'For whom am I toiling, depriving myself of pleasure?' This also is vanity and an unhappy business." Solomon talks again about the meaningless of achievement. How has the materialistic mindset of the world affected the Christian? Our culture stimulates the vices of anger and greed. We're envious of what others have, and the virtue of contentment is so difficult to obtain. Listen, if we only define success in terms of us, then we're always going to be a failure. Solomon tells us of a man who is alone. He has no dependents, no family, no brother, no son to whom he can leave his family inheritance. He amasses this fortune for what? The truth is that success is not its own reward. If you're working just to accumulate wealth, then we are very much in for a sad surprise. Solomon gets a little more positive here in this famous verse that you've probably heard read at weddings. It says, 2 are better than 1, verse 9, because they have a good reward for their toil. For if they fall, one will lift up his fellow, but woe to him who is alone when he falls and has not another to lift him up. Again, if 2 lie down together, they will keep warm, but how can one keep warm alone? And though a man may prevail against one who is alone, 2 will withstand him, and a threefold cord is not quickly broken. Loneliness seems to be one of the equivalent, or one of the most prevalent occurrences we experience in America today. Loneliness is cultivated in our culture. We take pride in independence, right? Be an independent person. Be an army of one. We have this declaration of independence, but God has made us dependent on Him and dependent on others. And some of the loneliest times in our lives is when we have sin or when we've made a mistake, when we mess up, and we just need somebody to pick us up, but we distance ourselves because we feel that shame and guilt. What would you say if you were asked to identify 3 things in your life that you need to be happy? Most of us would probably answer somewhere in these realms. Someone to love, to be loved, to have a purpose in life. The Lone Ranger wasn't even alone. He had Tonto. So that's why he says 2 are better than 1. Togetherness increases reward. 2 people working together can get more done. Togetherness provides help when we have problems. If you get into difficulty, there's a partner with you. Togetherness warms body and soul. 2 coals of fire, when separated, will be extinguished, but together they create heat and warmth. Togetherness holds up under attack. 2 is better than 1. Then what is better than 2? 3. And that's really the definition of the church. Where 2 or 3 are gathered, Jesus says, there I am in your name. There I am in the midst. And I always look at it as 2 people together, focused and centered and entwined their stories and lives with God. That cannot be broken. So there's strength in togetherness. That's a positive part of what Solomon's saying. But then he finishes up a little bit on the negative here, verses 13 through 16. Better was a poor and wise youth than an old and foolish king who no longer knew how to take advice. For he went from prison to the throne, and though in his own kingdom he had been born poor. I saw all the living who move about under the sun, along with that youth who was to stand in the king's place. There was no end of all the people, all of whom he led. Yet those who come later will not rejoice in him. Surely this is also vanity and a striving after the wind. I think Solomon is using himself as an example. What were some of the life lessons that he personally learned? Wisdom is important to a leader. It's better to be on the bottom and be wise than to be on top and be foolish. Why? Why is that? Because wisdom, you can better yourself. Foolishness just leads to that spiraling out of control. Age does not necessarily bring wisdom. The only thing that automatically comes with age is wrinkles. Age can be accompanied with as much stubbornness and foolishness as youth can. Everyone admires the one who could achieve success on his own. But that success is limited, right? That success is fleeting. Together success, team success is lasting, enduring, because it's built on relationships. And relationships is really what matters. All popularity, it's fleeting. It doesn't last. Today's stars are tomorrow's has-beens. But a real friend, a real relationship does last. They'll back you up when no one else will. Jesus did that. Jesus is that friend. He's that third cord that draws us together. He's the bridge to get us home. So there's the strength of togetherness, but there's also only purpose and advancement when we are together. Lonely is a tremendously lonely number. And there's an oppression of loneliness, and there's the meaningless of achievement unless that is achieved together in team. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this week. It's a challenging week. I know it seems like it's just negative thing after negative thing, but remember how we finished up every lesson. Jesus is the answer to our vanity. Jesus is the answer to our meaninglessness. Jesus is the answer to all of our labor. We're working for eternity. We're working for heaven. We're working for God's goals, not our own goals. We're working for His kingdom, not our empire. And Jesus is helping us every step of the way. Let's finish this week strong and enjoy the weekend. I'll see you on the Lord's Day here at Park Christian Church. Let's bow our heads in prayer. Father, thank you for these lessons, Father, that again, they're hard lessons, Father, but they're purposeful lessons to keep things in perspective, Father, and to keep our eyes where they need to be and our lives centered where they need to be centered. Father, help us to do that today and through the weekend and through whatever lies ahead until we meet again on Sunday and gather together and worship and pray and fellowship and break the bread together at the Lord's Supper, Father. And we look forward to that gathering. And so, Father, give us again purpose and meaning, design and direction in our today as we live for you. And pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. Hey, have a great weekend. Ready? Break.